Hello and welcome back to the lesson. In this video, we're going to start discussing about conditional statements in Python. We're going to be learning how to use the if, elif or else if, and else statement in Python. So as you can see, we have two variables defined beforehand, which is variable A and variable B, which both have values assigned to them, 20 and 50 respectively. And let's go ahead and start with the if statements right here. So let's actually go ahead and come down below here, and we're going to say if. We can then go ahead and specify our condition after the if keyword. So we're going to go ahead and say if B is greater than A, colon, and then hit enter. And then we're going to go ahead and say we wanted to print something. All right, let's go ahead and say print B is greater than A. Something like this. Okay, so as you can see, this is basically how we go about using the if keyword, if conditional statement. First of all, we're going to go ahead and define our if keyword right here, and followed by our condition right here. As you can see, I'm using one of the comparison operators to compare between our two values here by saying if B, which is 50, is greater than A, which is 20. And this condition will evaluate to true because, of course, 50 is greater than 20. So the idea behind the if statement is that whenever the condition you specify for the if statement, if the condition evaluates to true, then only what is inside the block of the if statement will be executed. Otherwise, it will not be executed. So meaning this line of code can only be executed if this condition evaluates to true. If the condition of our if statement is true. Otherwise, it will not be executed. So now let's go ahead and run our script. Let's go ahead and run our script like so. As you can see, our condition is true. That's why we are having our print statement right here that says B is greater than A. B is greater than A, which is true. 50 is greater than 20. So this is basically how we use the if statement in Python. First of all, we define the if keyword, followed by our condition, then colon, and then after that we hit enter. And as you can see, we have a little bit of indentation right here. So take note of the indentation please, because it's very important, because without the white space or the indentation right here, the print statement right here will not be from inside the scope of the if statement. So you need to take note of that. You cannot start the print statement right here because like so, it is outside the scope of the if statement. But you need to specify the white space. You need to indent it like so for it to properly work. So let me actually go ahead and show you without the indentation. If we go ahead and run our script, as you can see, indentation error. Expected an indented block after if statement on line 5. So as you can see, so it should be indented like so for it to properly work. As you can see, we are having our print statement B is greater than A. And now let's actually go ahead and change the value of B to 20. And as you can see, B is not greater than A. So the condition will evaluate to false right here. So remember, the if statement only executes the block of code inside its scope when the condition evaluates to true, and this condition will evaluate to false. So this line of code will not be executed. Now let's go ahead and give it a try. As you can see, we have nothing because the condition right here, the condition of our if statement evaluates to false. But if you go ahead and use the equal to, the equal sign, that means B is equals to A. 20 is equals to 20, which is true. Now if we should go ahead and run our script, as you can see, we have B is greater than A. Alright, so that's for the if keyword. Now we're going to go ahead and move to the elif or the else if statement or keyword. Now we're going to go ahead and come down here and go back a bit to get rid of the indentation right here and say elif like so. Elif, we're then going to go ahead and specify another condition if the first statement fails. Alright, first of all, let's go ahead and change this. Let's change it back to B is greater than A. And here we're going to go ahead and say if else if B is equals to A. Then we're going to go ahead and say we wanted to print this message that B is equal to A. Something like this. So basically what we are saying here is If the first condition does not satisfy, if it evaluates to true, then go ahead and print this line of code. Otherwise, if the first condition evaluates to false, meaning this condition is not true, then we should go ahead and check for another condition, which is right here. So first of all, our program is going to check if b is greater than a, which is not true in this case. So it's going to skip this block of code. It will not print this line of code, and it will then go ahead and check for the second condition, which is else if b is equals to a, which is true. And now it's going to go ahead and print this line of code. So let's actually go ahead and run our script to see for ourselves. As you can see, the second line of statement is executed right here, which is b is equals to a, because of course b is equals to a. 20 is equals to 20. How easy is this? Very simple, right? And now let's go ahead and take our b back to 50. Now if we should go ahead and run our script, we're going to get b is greater than a, because b right here, now b is 50. 50 is greater than 20. And here we are checking if 50 is greater than 20, if b is greater than a, which is true. So this line of statement will be executed, and it's going to go ahead and ignore the second condition right here. So now let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we have b is greater than a, b is greater than a. So friend, that's basically how we go about using the elif statement or the else if statement, and it is actually a way of saying if the previous condition were not true, then go ahead and try this condition, which is this second one right here. Alright, now we're going to go ahead and move to the else statement right here. So the else statement is going to execute a block of code if both the first and second condition does not satisfy. So if this condition fails and this one also fails, what will happen then? So this is where the idea of the else statement comes into action. We can simply go ahead and say if both the two initial condition fails, it should go ahead and finally give us something. That is, if everything fails, then do this. So let's go ahead and define that. We're going to go ahead and say else, like so, colon, and then hit enter. Remember the indentation. You need to have the indentation over here. So let's go ahead and now say we wanted to print. Let's go ahead and say we wanted to print none of the conditions satisfied. Alright, now let's go ahead and try to make both the condition, the two first condition, to not satisfied. So let's go ahead and see what we can do. Well, right here, b is greater than a. This condition satisfied, but this one does not. So let's actually go ahead and change this to 60, something like this. Alright, as you can see, b, which is 50, is not greater than 60. Alright, so this condition will fail, and this one will also fail because 50 is not equals to 60 and 50 is not greater than 60. So but this condition now will fail. Alright, now we should be expecting this block of code to be executed, because the idea behind the else statement right here, if both the condition fails, then it's going to execute whatever it's inside the scope of the else statement right here. So now let's go ahead and now run our script. As you can see, we have our else statement, the line of code within our else statement right here that says none of the conditions satisfied is executed because both the condition fails over here. So friend, this is basically how we go about implementing the conditional statements in Python using the if, elif, and else statements right here. And yes, of course, we can also have an else without the elif. So we can simply go ahead and say, for instance, we only have the if statement. Let me actually cut this, and else. So if this condition is satisfied, do this. Otherwise, do this. So now as you can see, the first condition, b is greater than a, 50 is greater than 60, does not satisfy. Then right here, we went straight ahead to say if the first condition does not satisfy, just go ahead and do this. Now as you can see, this condition does not satisfy, and now if we go ahead and run our script, we're gonna have none of the conditions satisfy because the first condition fails right here. So we can go ahead and basically have if and else statement without the elif statement, and it's totally fine. Alright, so we can go ahead and use our logical operators that we've learned in our previous lessons with our comparison operators, the logical AND, O and not. Let's actually go ahead and implement that as well. Now remember, our logical operators are used to combine conditional statements. So right here, now that we have a single condition that says if B is greater than A, which is not true, we can go ahead and use the logical and say and B is less than A. Alright, as you can see, now we have used the logical and to combine two conditional statements. Now one of this condition is true, which is this condition right here. B, which is 50, is of course less than A, which is 60. 50 is less than 60. This will evaluate to true, but this will evaluate to false because 50 is not greater than 60. But remember, the logical AND only returns true if both the condition satisfied, if both the condition evaluate the truth. So still this condition will fail because one of this condition is false. Now if I go ahead and run our script, we're gonna still get none of the condition satisfied because one of the condition right here evaluate to true and the other evaluate to false. And the logical AND operator, if you remember correctly, returns true only if both the condition that is joining together evaluate to true. Alright, so let's go ahead and now use the logical O to say. Now let's go ahead and say instead of AND, we're going to go ahead and use the O. Remember, the logical O operator evaluates to true if at least one of the conditions that is joining evaluate to true. So now we should be having this message. Let's actually go ahead and change the message. Let's come over here and say condition satisfied. Like so. Let's actually go ahead and change this one. Condition not satisfied. Alright, something like this. Now let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we have condition satisfied because one of the condition evaluate to true, which is this condition right here. B is less than A. 50 is less than 60. This evaluate to true, but B is not greater than A right here. 50 is not greater than 60. So, but because we are using the O, which returns true if at least one of the condition evaluate to true, that's why we are having this line of code executed that says condition satisfied over here. And we can as well go ahead and try the logical not. So let's actually go ahead and get rid of this first and leave only one condition. So here we are simply saying if B is less than A, which is true because B, which is 50, is greater than A, which is 60 right here. So this condition is satisfied. We'll always evaluate to true because 50 is of course less than 60. And now if we go ahead and run our script, we're going to see condition satisfied. But when we go ahead and use the not, logical not, if not B is less than A, that means it's now going to invert our return value. You know, by default, this condition is true. But using the not operator here, the logical not operator, if we get true, it is going to invert it to false. And if we get false, it's going to invert it to true. So now this condition will not satisfy because we are inverting our condition right here from true to false. Now if I go ahead and run our script, you're going to see we have condition not satisfied because we have inverted our return value here to false. We have inverted it from true to false. That's why this condition does not satisfy anymore, and that's the reason why we are having condition not satisfied. Alright, so I hope everything is clear to you. And for your information, the if statement cannot be empty. But if for some reasons you have an if statement with no content, meaning something like this, let me actually go ahead and get rid of this and remove this as well. So this is an empty if statement without any definition. You only specify the condition but no definition. You didn't define exactly what should happen if the condition either satisfies or fail. So you can go ahead and put the pass statement to avoid getting an error, because as it is now, when we go ahead and run an empty if statement, we're going to run into an error. So your if statement can never be empty. But for some reasons, as I've mentioned, if you do have an empty if statement, like you haven't decided what to do yet, you can simply go ahead and use the pass statement right here. So with this, you have no issue. You will not run to an error if you run your script with this empty if statement. As you can see, we do not have nothing and we have no issue whatsoever. So therefore, please take note, your if statement can never be empty. If you want to have an empty if statement, make sure you do put in the past statement to avoid getting an error. Alright, so friend, there's also a shorthand if statement. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to do the shorthand if statement, or the ternary operators or conditional expressions as it is called on the other hand. So let me go ahead and show you the shorthand way of writing if statements in Python. Now if you have only one statement to execute, you can put it on the same line as the if statement. So let's actually go ahead and do that. Now let's come over here, get rid of this. Now let me go ahead and change the numbering. Let's say 500 right here. And let's go ahead and now define the shorthand if statement. So we're going to go ahead and say print A. And then we're going to say if A is greater than B, else print B. Something like this. So this is basically the shorthand way of writing if statement. So first of all, as you can see, we define what to do. We said it should go ahead and print A if A is greater than B, else print B. Okay, so now if this condition satisfied, this block of code will be executed, and otherwise this print statement will be executed. So now let's go ahead and take a look, run our script. So now as you can see, we get B because this condition satisfied. A is of course greater than B. 500 is of course greater than 60. So this is basically the shorthand way of writing if statement, and this technique is called ternary operators or conditional expressions, as I've mentioned earlier. And you can also have multiple else statement on the same line. Let me actually go ahead and show you how to do that. Now let's come in that line of code, and now we can simply go ahead and say print A if A is greater than B, else print equal if A is equals to B, else print B. So as you can see, this is how we use multiple else statements on the same line. So here we are simply saying we should go ahead, our script should go ahead and print A if A is greater than B. Else you should go ahead and print equal if A is equals to B. Else it should print B if none of this condition satisfied. So let's actually go ahead and see. Now if I run our script, as you can see, we have B because none of this condition satisfy. A, which is 60, is of course not greater than B, which is 500, and 500 right here is not equals to 60. A is not equals to B. That's why we are having B printed right here, because both the conditions fails. But if I go ahead and now change the value of B to 60 as well, now we should have equal because 60 is equals to 60, A is equals to B. Now let's go ahead and run our script. As you can see, we have equal. And the same thing if I go ahead and change the value of A now to 70. As you can see now, this condition should be satisfied because 70 is of course greater than 60. Now we should have A. If I go ahead and run our script like so, we are having A. So friend, that will be it for this video. As you can see, we went ahead to learn how to use the if, the elif or the else if, and else statement in Python. So I hope you enjoyed the lesson and that everything is clear to you, and I will see you in the next one.